I'm an educator with Muslims for Progressive Values, and we do talk about gender within Islam. Most people think it's just a binary male and female, but it's actually more complex than you might think.
Hello, everyone. I'm Pamela Brewer, and I'm really pleased to introduce you to Kendra Cordova. Kendra is a board member with Muslims for Progressive Values. Kendra, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Well, Kendra, I asked you to join M.E.S.H because I had received an email announcement about a curriculum that you folks are working on, and it really sort of made my head spin because I was so surprised. Now, I will say that I had seen I think it was an award-winning piece that had been done by Muslims for Progressive Values, and it had to do with gender and gender diversity. But when I saw that there was a whole curriculum, sort of my head spun around like 3 or 4 times. So help us understand what the organization is and the genesis for what I'm really excited to hear about, um, which is a look at sexual and gender diversity within Islam, which I think a lot of people don't think exists.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, so the piece I think you're talking about for the award winning is a short film that Muslims for Progressive Values was one of the main funders and sort of like not producers, but like we were one of the main funders and supporters for the film. And it's called Witness. It's actually available on YouTube. So if any of your viewers want to go see it, it's free. They can go watch it. And it's centered around a trans male Muslim, right? But the people around him, some of them don't know that he's trans. And so he sort of gets caught in this situation where he knows who he is and he knows his faith. And there are some other people, including the imam there, right, who are having a conflict of what they have been taught through cultural versions and more conservative versions of Islam, as opposed to this person who they know and love. And they have to sort of come to terms with those sort of conflicting things that are going on. As far as the curriculum itself, it's a pretty long curriculum. Each unit takes about 2 hours, 2 to 3 hours of lecture to go through. We go through everything from women's rights within Islam, religious freedom in Islam. And right now, as you said, we're currently in the middle of going through Unit 7, which is sexual and gender diversity in Islam. Muslims for Progressive Values works with all of these sorts of topics, but we don't see it as a reinterpretation of Islam so much as a return to the original progressive views and progressive actions and worldviews and experiences that Islam was there to form in 7th century Arabia.
There are so many, I would think you would agree, myths, if you will, or misinterpretations, misunderstanding about Islam. And women's rights, I think the prevailing view, or at least a view for large numbers within the population, is that women don't have rights. Sexual and gender diversity does not exist. So to hear you talk about these things as not only being a topic, but also content that you're going through in great detail, to me is just wonderful and exciting. And one of the things, as I said, I went through some of the curriculum. And one of the things, I learned a lot, by the way, so it's very well done. I was glad that I was able to take a look. But as I read your curriculum, I learned that the term homosexuality is not referenced in the Quran at all. I was really surprised.
Yeah, homosexuality, the term, and actually just the whole concept of it is more modern. Social framings, and I'm sure you and all of your viewers are very aware of this, but when it comes to like social and cultural beliefs on roles that people play on a person's experience, whether that experience is considered positive or negative, all of those things are mostly just things that you're taught based on the people around you. And it's not really until you get down into like the science and really taking a look at some of these like behaviors, in psychology and in neuroscience, that we start to understand why people do what they do, why they think what they think, and things like that. So yes, if you go into any of the more ancient texts or any of the Abrahamic texts, including like the Bible and ones like that, homosexuality as a term is actually not referenced anywhere. Specifically, what people point to when they think they're talking about homosexuality is the story of the prophet Lut in the Christian side of things.
Mhm.
And it's really that story that they grab onto. There's only a few lines within the Quran itself that talk about anything that could even maybe reference homosexuality. And as we go through in the curriculum, and you probably saw there in the unit, it often gets misinterpreted. But because we do love to listen to the people around us, because we're social creatures, if everybody is saying that this must be what we're talking about, until you take the time to go back and look at it and try to understand it yourself, people are going to make the assumption that, well, everybody said this was about homosexuality, so I guess it is.
So let me step back a bit. Um, Tell us how you identify yourself.
Okay. Thank you for asking, actually. So yeah, I'm non-binary, gender non-binary. Although I do know I'm femme presenting, right? So I was born assigned female at birth and was raised in a more conservative upbringing towards femininity. And then it was only a few years ago that sort of, as I was delving into the psychologies and all of these other things, I started to understand myself a little more and came out as gender non-binary. I use they, them pronouns, and I've actually even transitioned in my workplace where I use M.E.H, which is the gender non-binary um, title there at the front, as opposed to Miss, Mrs, or anything like that.
So how did this impact family, friends, and you? I mean, you lived a certain way, you were brought up to believe certain things, behave certain way, have certain expectations of yourself. I would think that much of that is now different and has had a tremendous impact on people around you. What would you say?
I would say that God actually made me very lucky. Everything that I live really goes through the spirituality. So I'm not saying, of course, to your viewers that it has to be spiritually led, but for myself, it is. And for me, I believe that God made me very lucky because God gave me this ability to sort of like really want to learn more all the time, asking questions. And so I already had to go through sort of that shocking and changing the course of myself and my life with my family because I'm not actually a born Muslim. I was raised in the Catholic Church. And so having a Catholic family with being raised within the Catholic school systems, mass twice a week, all of the stuff, to eventually becoming a Muslim, I already had that sort of break with them. And at first, anytime I'm coming out to talk about identity and worldview, and to your viewers out there who might find themselves in those situations, it's never easy. Really, it's not. We always wait for the right time, like, well, maybe if I try next week, or when they're in a better mood, or anything like that.
Right.
And the truth is that it's not going to get easier. And so this is what I talk to my students too as well, is when it comes to yourself and your beliefs, whether it's that you have a progressive view of Islam while your family has a more conservative view, or whether it's I have a sort of certain gender identity or a view on gender and sexuality that might not mesh with my family, it's not going to get easier. And the thing that you need to worry about is, what values do you hold? What do you believe is right? And making sure you're living through that, because really you're the only one that has to live with you every day, all the time, for your whole life. So as long as you're living by what you believe is the right thing to do, as hard as those other conversations might end up being, in the end, that's really what matters.
So within the community, and now I'm thinking not only about you, but also about the film that you just talked about a little bit, Witness. The person he was clear about who he was. The imam, not so much, and not very happy, and there was a lot of pushback. So when I think of sexual and gender diversity, and I know not at all. I'm embarrassed to say how little I know about the perspective within Islam. But when I think about it, I think it's not going to be accepted. It's not okay that essentially going to be shunned and not welcome in any place where Islam is celebrated. So if that is true, how do you deal with that? And maybe that's not true.
So it's more complex than that, as most things are, right? Most things are more complex than simply the black and white, accepted or not accepted. So I actually want to give you guys, if that's okay, just take a short minute here and give you guys some examples.
Perfect.
Within Islam, including today, some of the cultures and countries and the way that is sort of seen between everybody. Yeah, it's not just accepted or not accepted.
Okay.
It's more complicated than that. Now, I would be lying if I said that doesn't happen. That happens. And in fact, it happens frequently. So people who think that there isn't room for it, there is room for it. And there are examples of it throughout Islamic history and modern times. But you are correct in believing that where we are right now, overall, that there is a push towards a gender binary and a misogynistic interpretation of Islam that is sort of the predominating voice in a lot of situations right now, which is why Muslims for Progressive Values exists, because we are here to sort of say, hey guys, we need to remember our history. We need to look at the diversity here and we need to pay attention to it. So I'm going to give you a few examples from early Islam and modern Islam. Perfect. The first one I want to give you guys, though, because this is literally something that we're talking about all the time in the news right now, and many people don't know about it, right, is that in Iran, since the 1980s, because of a fatwa that was put out by the Ayatollah there, gender reassignment surgery is supported in Iran, including supported by the government. It's accepted socially, and people can, change their genders on, documents and things like that as well.
That really, I'm almost embarrassed to say. I'm excited to hear that, but I'm so embarrassed to say I had no idea. That sounds amazing to me, and so accepting and welcoming. Again, for just the world at large, I think nowadays, clearly my personal opinion, but it doesn't matter what you believe. If you don't believe this or that, then all of a sudden you're an enemy of the state. So I think that's the world.
It is more nuanced than that, right? So that is true at once. So gender diversity and gender reassignment surgery being accepted within a strict governmental structure is held simultaneously with the problems when it comes to the serious issues on misogyny and authoritarianism within regimes like that one as well. So it's not really, they're progressive because they have this, but more that we go through and we point out that it's more complicated than people want to make it. It's not just Muslims don't think that there's, gender diversity. It's a little more complex. So the first examples that we can talk about when it comes to gender diversity, which are in the unit as well, is called the Muqannathun. So the Muqannathun are in early Islam and pre-Islamic Arabia, but they are in there as well in the texts for early Islam, are males who either are very effeminate or they are considered gay or asexual. Now, none of those words were in any of the early texts. They weren't. So basically, it was an assumed thing. And the way that they're described in the Quran, the line in the Quran that describes them says, men who have no need or no use for women. And that sentence for them is actually used in a part of the Quran that's saying who a woman can take her hijab off and not have to dress as modestly around. And one of those is the men who have no use or no need for women, which they didn't say homosexual, but they said he's not going to be looking at you like that. And that right there in the Quran, it's already there.
So I hate to interrupt you, but
go ahead.
I'm just mindful of our time, which is disappearing like crazy. For the person who has believed up until this point, even perhaps up until this moment, that they believing and experiencing themselves as a different gender from the one in which they were born into, there's a place for them
Yes.
within Islam.
Yes. I
What's a
have many trans friends.
what's
They're there.
what's a first of all, the fact that there's a place is wonderful, but what's a first step? Do they call someone? Do they read something? I mean, what is a first step?
The first step is going to be finding information. Knowledge is power. It always is. Knowledge is power because it is such a contested thing with the misogynistic mainstream interpretations that are so common that that the conservative side is so entrenched in their talking points at this point that if you can't actually pull a piece of evidence and hand it to them, it's really hard to stand that belief because you will feel alone, right? And I talked about that a little bit at the beginning, and it might be scary. So the
Right.
first thing you need to do is to go do research. There are lots of books. Homosexuality, which was a more academic piece that was done, Homosexuality in Islam by Scott Hiraj Kugel. Dr. Kugel has a whole piece on it. There's a whole list. If you go to Muslims for Progressive Values, mpbusa.org, we actually have a book list on there. And there's a whole section for that as well. Classes like the one I'm teaching exist. I have a friend, he doesn't even work with Muslims for Progressive Values, but he holds a queer Muslim group every once a month in Phoenix, Arizona. So just finding people that know this, finding people that have the knowledge, go search for it. And then once you get that ground and you can start to see the evidence there, you have that information, it'll be much easier to come out and start talking about it.
So clearly what you're saying is that, I mean, the conservative view still absolutely exists, but
Yes.
there's also space for a more open, accepting view and experience. How can folks be in touch or learn more about Muslims for Progressive Values?
Yeah, so mpbusa.org is going to be our main website, and that has the links to absolutely everything. We also have a newsletter list. And if you guys want more from me specifically, if you guys have enjoyed sort of the topics here, as she said, our time is running out, right? But I have hours and hours and hours of content over on our YouTube channel. So if you go to YouTube and you go to MPV with Kendra, all of my videos will come. There's a whole playlist. It's also in there as a podcast, and you can hear everything from women's rights to religious freedom to gender and intersectionality in Islam.
That sounds wonderful. Speaking of YouTube, I too am going to ask listeners to join the M.E.S.H with Dr. Pamela Brewer YouTube channel. But in closing our conversation today, I would like to close with a quote from your curriculum, in which you say, "We know all too well the benefits of ostracizing minorities and individuals who are considered to be, in quotes, abnormal when leaders are attempting to distract from environmental, religious, social, or political crisis." I think that says it all about so much, and I just want to thank you again for taking the time to join us today, and I may want to impose upon your time again in the future, if that is okay.
I would love to come back whenever you want me. Thank you
That's
so much for having me today.
Absolutely. You as well. And folks, thank you again for joining us today on this edition of M.E.S.H. I trust that you have learned something today. I certainly have. When you subscribe to the M.E.S.H with Dr. Pamela Brewer YouTube channel, you will have access to all of the programs that we have done, and you will be able to listen whenever you like, wherever you like. And of course, we're also available on Facebook, LinkedIn, and your favorite podcast channel. So thank you again for joining us, and hopefully you'll be here next week. I will. I hope you will too. Take care.